I always thought I could read Sophia like a book. 25 years of marriage gives you that kind of insight, or so I believed. I knew her quirks, her routines, even the way her mood would shift when she was trying to hide something. But nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to discover that night. It started with a phone. We were sitting in the living room, her on the couch with her laptop, me flipping through a magazine. It was a normal evening, the kind we had shared thousands of times, or at least that's what I thought. Her phone buzzed, the screen lighting up briefly before she hurriedly flipped it over. I wouldn't have thought much of it except for the way her shoulders tensed. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She didn't look up, just said, "It's so casual," so dismissively that I almost let it go. Almost, but something in her voice didn't sit right. It was too rehearsed, too practiced, and the way she avoided meeting my eyes was a dead giveaway. "Sophia," I said, my voice firmer this time. "Let me see your phone." Her head snapped up, her expression shifting from calm to defensive in an instant. "Alan, don't be ridiculous," she said, clutching the device tightly. "It's just work. Emil's. Why are you being so paranoid?" "I'm not being paranoid," I said, standing. "I'm asking for a simple thing. If it's just work, there's no reason to hide it, right?" She hesitated, her grip tightening on the phone. That was all the confirmation I needed. "Give me the phone, Sophia." "No." Her voice was sharper now, her mask slipping. I didn't wait for her to argue further. I reached out and grabbed it, ignoring her protests. She stood and tried to snatch it back, but I held firm. My heart pounded as I unlocked the screen. What I found made my stomach drop. Messages, dozens of them. Some were innocent enough, but others. "Can't wait to see you again tonight. Last time was incredible. He has no idea, does he? Poor guy. You're so much better than him in every way." The words blurred together as I scrolled through each one, a knife to the gut. And then there were the photos, her and Daniel, smiling, laughing in places she had told me were work events. My hands shook as I lowered the phone, staring at her in disbelief. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. She crossed her arms, her expression shifting from panic to defiance. "Does it matter how long?" "Sophia," I repeated, my voice rising. She sighed, rolling her eyes like I was the one inconveniencing her. "A few months," she said, her tone clipped. "And before you start with the moral high ground, let me save you the trouble. Yes, I've been seeing Daniel. Yes, I care about him. And no, I don't feel guilty about it." I stared at her, the woman I had loved and sacrificed for, and felt something inside me break. "You don't feel guilty?" I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and hurt. "After everything we've built, everything I've done for you." "Oh, don't start that," she snapped, cutting me off. "Don't act like you're some martyr. You're the same man you've always been, Alan, stuck in your garage, stuck in your routine. You've never grown, never changed. Daniel is a man with ambition, with power. He's everything you'll never be." Her words hit harder than any physical blow. "So that's it?" I asked, my voice breaking. "You're throwing away 25 years of marriage for someone like him?" She smirked, a cruel, cold expression I had never seen before. "Yes, and if you try to fight me on this, Alan, I'll destroy you. I'll take the house, the business, everything. You'll have nothing left." Her threat hung in the air like a storm cloud, but I didn't flinch. I had spent years fighting to build a life for us, a life she was so eager to destroy. If she thought I was just going to roll over and let her win, she was dead wrong. "You want to destroy me," I said, my voice low and steady. "Good luck with that." For the first time, her smirk faltered. She didn't realize it then, but she had just declared war, and I don't lose. After Sophia's declaration of war, the house felt colder, quieter, like it was already hers in name, but abandoned in spirit. That night, I didn't argue further. Instead, I sat in my workshop with a cold beer, replaying the confrontation over and over in my mind. She thought she had won. That much was clear. She thought she'd stripped me of my power, that her threats would keep me silent and compliant. But Sophia had underestimated me. I've been a fighter my whole life, not with fists, but with grit, determination, and patience. I built my garage from the ground up with my bare hands, long before she ever came into the picture. And now, I'd use those same qualities to dismantle the life she had built with Daniel, piece by piece. The first thing I did was protect what mattered most, my business. The garage wasn't just a source of income. It was my legacy. Over the years, I had put everything into it, expanding from a single-bay operation into a thriving enterprise with a loyal client base. Sophia knew how much it meant to me, which is why she had threatened to take it. But she wouldn't. The next morning, I met with my lawyer, an old friend named Victor, who had seen me through every major milestone in life, buying my first home, setting up the business, even writing my will. I need your help, I told him, laying out the situation in blunt terms. Victor leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. You're doing the right thing, coming to me first, he said. If she's serious about coming after your assets, we need to act fast. Within days, we had transferred ownership of the garage into a trust that Sophia couldn't touch. The house came next, another layer of protection she wouldn't see coming. Alan, Victor said as we wrapped up the paperwork, you're giving her enough rope to hang herself. You just don't lose your cool when she realizes what's happening. I smiled grimly. Don't worry, she won't see it coming. At home, I kept up the charade of the clueless, defeated husband. I stopped asking Sophia about her late nights and pretended to be too wrapped up in work to notice her absence. If it wasn't for the rage simmering just beneath the surface, it might have felt like old times. She'd come home late, making half-hearted excuses about meetings or deadlines, and I'd nod, pretending to believe her. You're working hard lately, I said one evening as she sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone. Someone has to, she replied, not even looking up. The contempt in her tone stung, but I let it slide, let her feel superior, let her think I was beaten. That night, while she was asleep, I checked her phone again. The messages with Daniel were still there, bold, arrogant, like they had no fear of being caught. He's so predictable, Sophia had written. I almost feel bad, almost. Don't waste energy on him, Daniel replied. We're building something better. They had no idea how wrong they were. The following week, I hired a private investigator, a no-nonsense woman named Lila, who came highly recommended by Victor. This your first rodeo? She asked, flipping through a notebook as I explained the situation. First and last, I said. I'm not interested in dragging this out. I just want to make sure they don't get away with it. She nodded. Fair enough. Give me a week, and I'll have everything you need. True to her word, Lila delivered by the end of the week. I had a folder full of damning evidence against Daniel, not just his affair with Sophia, but his shady business dealings, fraudulent contracts, and a history of workplace harassment that would make headlines if it ever came to light. I'll admit, Lila said as she handed over the folder, I've seen a lot of scumbags, but this guy's in a league of his own. I thanked her and left her office. The weight of the folder in my hands matched only by the satisfaction burning in my chest. The first move was subtle, almost unnoticeable to anyone who wasn't paying attention. I sent an anonymous tip to one of Daniel's biggest corporate clients, attaching documents that exposed his fraudulent billing practices. Within days, the client pulled their account and launched an internal investigation. The news spread quickly, shaking Daniel's firm to its core. At home, Sophia seemed oblivious to the growing storm. She was too busy basking in the glow of her imagined victory, texting Daniel about their future plans. Did you hear what happened at work today? She asked one evening, her tone casual. No, I replied, barely glancing up from my plate. One of our clients is throwing a fit over some stupid billing error. I hid my smile behind a sip of water. I'm sure he'll handle it, she nodded, unaware that the tracks were already forming. The second move was more direct. I leaked details of Daniel's workplace harassment cases to a prominent journalist, someone I knew wouldn't let the story die quietly. Within hours of the article going live, the backlash was swift and unforgiving. Sophia came home that night, visibly rattled. Daniel's been in meetings all day, she said, pacing the living room. Some reporter dug up old accusations, and now everyone's acting like he's guilty. Maybe he is, I said, keeping my tone neutral. She glared at me. You don't know him. No, but I knew enough when Daniel showed up in my garage a few days later. I was ready for him. He stepped out of his flashy car, his tailored suit slightly rumpled, and marched toward me with a confidence that reeked of desperation. "Alan," he said, forcing a smile. "We need to talk." I wiped my hands on a rag, leaning casually against the hood of a car. "About what?" "Look, I know this situation isn't ideal," he began, his tone oily. "But we're all adults here. There's no need to make things messy." I raised an eyebrow. "Messy?" He hesitated, clearly not expecting me to play it so calmly. "Sophia and I, this isn't personal, it's just life." I laughed, a low, humorless sound that made him falter. "Life, huh? Is that what you call stealing another man's wife and threatening his livelihood?" "Alan," he said, his tone turning stern, "if you keep pushing, this won't end well for you." I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a dangerous calm. "You don't get to decide how this ends. But don't worry, you'll find out soon enough." For the first time, Daniel looked nervous, and he should have been. After Daniel's visit to the garage, the cracks in his polished facade widened. The corporate client, who had pulled their account, filed an official complaint with the Bar Association, triggering an investigation into Daniel's firm. But that was just the beginning. The harassment scandal was gaining traction in the media. Employees, both former and current, were coming forward with stories about Daniel's predatory behavior. Some of the accusations involved settlements he had quietly arranged to keep things out of court, while others were uglier, pointing to a pattern of abuse and manipulation that went back years. For a man who thrived on power and appearances, the public scrutiny was devastating. Sophia, of course, was caught in the middle. Her carefully constructed image as a rising legal star began to crumble as colleagues whispered about her relationship with Daniel. She came home every evening more agitated than the last, her frustration spilling over in snide remarks and intense silences. "I don't know what's wrong with people," she said one night, pacing the living room. "One baseless article, and suddenly everyone's out to destroy him. It's pathetic. Maybe they're tired of being stepped on," I said, not bothering to hide the edge of my voice. She stopped pacing, her eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said, turning back to the TV. "Just an observation." As the weeks went by, I began to notice a shift in Sophia's demeanor. She was spending less time with Daniel, whether by choice or circumstance. I wasn't sure. But I wasn't about to let my guard down. One evening, as I was closing up the garage, I got a call from Layla, the private investigator. "You're not going to believe this," she said, her tone laced with amusement. "Try me," I replied. "Daniel K. Firm is hemorrhaging clients, and a few of his former employees are gearing up to sue. But here's the kicker. One of them reached out to me, asking if you'd be willing to help." I frowned, confused. "Help with what?" "She's claiming Daniel forced her to sign a non-disclosure agreement after a particularly nasty incident. She wants to break it, but she's scared. She says she heard about what you're doing and thinks you might be able to back her up." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. The idea that someone saw me as a potential ally in this mess was unexpected. "Put her in touch with my lawyer," I said finally. "If she's serious, I'll help her." Layla chuckled. "You're really enjoying this, aren't you?" "More than I should," I admitted. It didn't take long for Sophia to feel the ripple effects of Daniel's downfall. Without his influence to shield her, she found herself under scrutiny at work. Colleagues who had once admired her began keeping their distance, and her case load dwindled as clients requested new representation. One evening, she came home later than usual, her face pale and drawn. "What's wrong?" I asked, my concern evident. She hesitated, clearly debating whether to confide in me. "Things at work aren't great," she admitted finally. "Oh, Daniel's situation is making things complicated," she said, choosing her words carefully. "Some clients are pulling out, and now the partners are talking about restructuring." "Restructuring," I repeated, leaning back in my chair. "That sounds serious." She shot me a glare. "You don't have to sound so smug about it." "I'm not," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "It just seems like a lot of people are paying for Daniel's mistakes." Her glare deepened, but she didn't argue Daniel predictably wasn't handling the pressure well. Rumors swirled that he was planning to sell what was left of his firm and leave the city. What Sophia didn't know was that I had arranged for a final blow through Lila's connections. I had sent copies of Daniel's financial misdeeds to the IRS. It wasn't long before they launched an investigation, freezing his accounts and effectively cutting off his lifeline. When Sophia found out, it was through a phone call I overheard late one night. "What do you mean? They froze your accounts," she hissed, her voice trembling. Daniel's response was muffled, but whatever he said sent her into a spiral. "How am I supposed to fix this if you can't even?" She stopped mid-sentence, running a hand through her hair. "No, don't tell me to calm down. I've lost everything because of you." I leaned against the doorframe, watching her unravel with a sense of grim satisfaction. She had chosen Daniel over me, believing he was her ticket to a better life. Now she was finally seeing him for what he was, a Howard willing to throw her under the bus to save himself. It was late on a Friday night when Sophia finally confronted me. I was in the garage, going over paperwork when she stormed in, her eyes red and puffy from crying. "This is your fault," she said, slamming the door behind her. I raised an eyebrow. "My fault? Enlighten me. You've been sabotaging us, haven't you?" she demanded, her voice shaking with rage. "The accounts, the leaks, the IRS. Don't act like you don't know." I stood slowly, meeting her gaze with a calm I didn't entirely feel. "Even if I was," I said, stepping closer, "what are you going to do about it?" Her bravado faltered, her expression crumbling as the weight of her situation finally hit her. "You destroyed everything," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "No," I said coldly. "You destroyed everything the moment you decided I wasn't enough. All I did was make sure you couldn't take me down with you." For a moment, she just stood there, staring at me, like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out of the garage. I didn't follow. By the end of the month, Sophia was gone. She moved out quietly, taking only what little she had left. The divorce was finalized shortly after, with no alimony or property claims on her part. Daniel, meanwhile, disappeared entirely, leaving behind a ruined career and a trail of lawsuits. As for me, I moved forward. The garage thrived, my children supported me, and for the first time in years, I felt free. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about Sophia and wondered if she regretted her choices. But those moments were fleeting. I had spent too long fighting for what I had to waste time dwelling on the past. The future was mine, and I intended to make the most of it.